So basically, a couple months ago, I made a video where basically I just told you everything you need to know about chickens. I went through literally all the little details about raising chickens. And in today's video, we're going to be revisiting that video, except it's not going to be an hour and 4 minutes long. It's going to be like maybe 11 minutes long at most. I don't know how long it's going to be based on the script, but let's jump into this. But before we begin, don't forget to go down below and click that like and subscribe button. We try to reach 4K hours, 4K subs, 4K pretty much everything at this point. So let's begin. So in the 1 hour documentary version of this video, I brought up 3 chicken breeds, and those 3 were the Barred Rock, the Buff Orpington, and the Easter Egger chickens. However, I've since changed my opinions a little bit, and I'm gonna add the Golden Buffs there. Because guys, as you guys probably know, recently my chickens got absolutely destroyed last Friday. The Golden Buffs had the least casualties, and of that flock, the Golden Buffs will stand strong. I say, get some Golden Buffs. They're a little bit smaller than the rest. They might be a little bit picked on, but they're really good. So I say those 4 chicken breeds are the greatest. I'll reiterate this again. Barred Rocks, the black and white striped ones. Buff Orpingtons, the yellow ones. And Easter Eggers, of course, the multicolored ones. But did I forget to mention? Golden Buffs. They're golden, as the name suggests. Well, darker golden. Now this bit was divided into basically 2 different sections, basically. One of them I talked about the essentials that you need for baby chickens, but the other one talked a little bit more about, you know, the less essential ones, to say the least. I do not know why I write scripts this badly. But guys, I'm gonna be real with you. The really essential ones are definitely like heat lamps, but I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. After my experience with heat lamps yesterday, I'm probably never going to buy a heat lamp again and instead buy, I think they're like heating pads or whatever for the baby chickens. And the reason, I'm going to tell you a quick little story. So basically, I walk into the barn, right, and it smells like smoke. I see smoke coming out of the chicken brooder. I'm like, oh, you know what I said probably. And I run in there, I lift the heat lamp out of there, disconnect it, and like throw it on the floor. Drop the water. I'm like, wow. I counted all my 19 little baby chickens that were born a couple weeks ago. You know, they all survived. They were good. And basically, I was like, wow, y'all survived. Y'all are old enough at this point. It's like 80 degrees out. You don't need the heat lamp during the day. I'm probably never going to buy another one again, to be honest with you guys. But back to the point. You're going to need a brooder, of course. You're going to need some shavings, some chicken feed, a feeder to put the chicken feed in, a waterer, and I also think the less essential ones that you might also need are going to be more like cosmetic things for your chickens, you know? So basically, really buy whatever you need, but make sure those things that I just mentioned are on your list. Either heat lamp or those heating pads that they use. I'm not a big fan of either, but I'm probably not going to buy another heat lamp again because I'm trying to not burn down the barn here. Alright, so now we're going to be talking about baby chicken care, which basically, what we're going to say here today is just basically how to care for them. So basically, what I mentioned in that video was cleaning their brooder every day, sometimes twice a day if they're really messy, but in general, just once a day, or when they get a little bit older, once every other day. Just make sure that you scoop out the shavings and add new ones in as you go, because they're going to need shavings. They make a mess really quickly. I think it's also noteworthy that as they get bigger, you can add a little cinder block in there to put the water on top of it. You need to change out water more frequently than you clean their brooder, of course, because the water is really important. Make sure their feeder, they can't like actually stick their whole body in there, because if they do, then that's going to cause some pretty significant issues. Now, the process of telling apart your chickens, or the real scientific way to call it, is called the chickens, which basically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be telling them apart based on if they're a hen or a rooster. In my videos, I always say telling them apart because, you know, that word's a little bit, you know what I'm trying to say. But guys, in my honest opinion and in my experience, there's a couple of key differences you'll notice. Specifically, even just in like a week, really. You'll notice the roosters develop a lot faster than hens. Their combs are a bit bigger. And when they're getting a bit older, like I'm talking 5, 6, 7 weeks old, you're going to hear a really disgruntled crowing sound coming from their brooder. The crowing sound will not sound like what it actually sounds like. So it'll sound like their current one, as like an adult, except downgraded all the way down. It's gonna be really bad, but it'll get better. They'll learn how to actually crow once they get a little bit older. Now for this segment, I talked about temperature moderation, which is basically keeping those temperatures in check in the brooder and in general. In the brooder, you want to lower that temperature by 5 degrees every single week. But if the temperature in the brooder consistently matches the outdoor temperature, then they are ready to be moved outside. Just slowly introduce them. We'll talk about this a little bit later though. Now, from my experience, it's best to introduce them outside in phases. And if you're going to add a lot of chickens to a new flock, I'll briefly explain this later in this clip. But basically, you want to introduce them outside in phases. So phase number 1 is letting them outside for the first ever time, keeping them in moderation, of course. And the second time, allow them out for a little bit longer, maybe no longer in moderation, well, less strict moderation. But then you might want to move them out to the hoop coop. And this hoop coop is basically just like a really strong and secure coop that's a little bit easier to move than a normal chicken tractor, because this time you just move it with your hands, you know? But from my personal experience, that's really good if you're only going to be introducing chickens to a new flock, because it gets them used to the outdoors and as to what they could be anticipating from a coop, while also basically guaranteeing their safety. Now, from that video, I derived a couple of basics that a chicken coop really needs, so make yourself a little checklist for this. The first thing is a really strong and secure door. The second thing is layers. You want to make sure your chicken coop has layers to it. So if something big like a bear is trying to break into it, it has to break down multiple layers to get in. It really makes the coop very strong and helps keep them cool in the summer if you add foam into the interior as well. You also want to make sure that your chicken coop has the right flooring required for shavings, which is really any flooring, but flooring is really important for chickens, and make sure they won't get, like, you know, little splinters on their foot. And also make sure that there's chicken wire on the windows, because, well, that's possibly going to cause the raccoons just tear through that, and you know what happens after that point. And also, if you want to, you can add an automatic door. It's really important, and I talk about automatic doors a lot in the 1 hour video. We'll try to keep automatic chicken coop doors mentions in this video at an all-time low. Now, the next thing I talked about were chicken coop modifications, and there are a couple chicken coop modifications I really want to go over today. The automatic doors, of course, a backup door in the back, especially if you have a rooster, it will be really convenient, especially if you're cleaning out the coop in both directions. And lastly, but certainly not least, would be just a door to get in to collect your eggs. It's really useful. And also, you can add an egg collecting thing that we currently have in our farm flock, which is basically like the chicken lays the eggs in the box and it rolls towards the front. Now, in the 1 hour version of this video, this was basically just me talking about random stuff, but I'll give you the basic rundown of it all. Basically, when you move out the chickens outside, they've basically already got all that experience they need when you're introducing them to the outside. So now when you're actually moving them outside, what you want to do is you want to put them in that chicken coop for like 2 to 3 days, so they actually know where that chicken coop is. Don't just blindly move them outside and then the next day let them out, because they won't know where to go. But if they have a chicken coop to go back to, they'll know exactly where to go. Now, in that video, when I talked about the transition to pullets, I basically just talked about the signs. Now, that sign is basically their comb is growing rapidly. You know, they begin to transition from that peeping noise that you really know them from baby chickens to that clucking noise that you know from adult chickens. This is going to be the phase where the chickens are under a year old. They might just be beginning to lay eggs. The eggs are very small, and it requires a lot to get a normal breakfast from them. Alright, quick intermission, post-editing the chicken here. I realized I forgot to talk about the transition into giving them like fully like adult hen feed, which happens at around 16 weeks old. I don't know how I left this out of the script, but you never know, man. It just happens sometimes. Now, next up, we're going to talk about collecting eggs, and basically collecting eggs, all you just got to do is walk out there, and you got to collect the eggs. You want to collect them slowly and gently, because you don't want to be breaking any eggs, and when you bring them inside, I'd recommend separating the ones that don't need to be washed to the ones that do need to be washed, because there's a big difference. The ones that are washed will only last 2 weeks, even when refrigerated. The ones that aren't washed will last 6 months, even if not refrigerated. So guys, you got to make sure you really do your separation there, and if you're going to be selling them, you don't want to be selling dirty eggs, right? Now, next up, we discuss the best chicken yard accessories. Now, basically, these are things that you should be adding outside of the chicken coop into the actual chicken yard. First of all, a place for them to graze, and second of all, of course, a fence. They're gonna need that stuff, that's the obvious. But an area for them to roost, of course, in that yard, not for nighttime, just a great area for them to just get over there in general. And protection from aerial predators. All you really gotta do is take 2 cinder blocks, place them on the area, place them in an area, and place them in a way where they're tall. And then you want to make sure that there's something covering the top of it, and you get protection from those aerial predators like red-tailed hawks, eagles, and similar things that'll try to take your chickens away. Now in that video, the way that we treat illness and other similar things around here varies. First things first, we take them to the vet office in case that they are like sick. But in a case where they're like injured, we'll try to like separate them from the flock, give them a nice area to stay, and also talk to the veterinarian about possible prescriptions that your chickens may need to get, such as over-the-counter medications and similar things. So always make sure that your chickens are getting as safe as possible and remove any big threats that might lie within your chicken yard. Now in this section, I talked about introducing brand new chickens out to an already existing flock, and the way to do is actually really easy. All you really got to do is just throw them in that flock and keep them there. But you do want to keep the chickens cooped up for 2 or 3 days, that way those brand new chickens can understand exactly where everything is. And basically you want to give them a little tour of the yard, you know, just basically telling them this is where this is and this is where that is, basically. Now basically there are 2 ways that you could be hatching out baby chickens. The first way is using an incubator and the second way is using a broody chicken. It's a little bit easier for a broody chicken because you don't have to actually manage a broody chicken. You just want to make sure they're separate from the flock and you know all that sort of stuff. And when they're born, you want to place them in an incubator. When those chicks are hatching out, place them in an incubator, place the surviving ones in there, and make sure that they're nice and warm, have a little heat lamp or a heating pad as I discussed earlier in this video, but just make sure that your baby chickens are going to be nice and warm because, well, if they're cold, they're not going to survive that first night. So make sure that your broody chicken is with them for at least 2 weeks, but when you separate them, they will be a little bit mad, but that's completely normal. Now in that section, I talked about how to retire your chickens properly. Now basically, retiring chickens usually comes after they hit 5 years old, because 5 chicken years is equivalent to, I'd say, around 58 or 59 human years, and at that point they're obviously no longer their peak selves anymore. So just keep them in a nice area because they're not going to be able to fight back against things like hawks and other similar things that would be able to possibly get away if they were a little bit younger, but just make sure to be a little bit lighter on them. Make sure you spoil them a little bit more because you never know when one could possibly end up dropping dead. So basically, always make sure that you know that your chickens are loved at that age, because at that point, your chickens aren't really going to be as healthy as they were at one point. Now, when it comes down to chicken loss, it's obviously really upsetting, especially that first time that it happens. It's always like something small like a red-tailed hawk. But if you are dealing with like your first-time predator attack from a chicken and it's like a fox broke in and killed 4 of your chickens, then yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit more devastating than if a little hawk came by while you weren't looking and took 1 chicken, or a bobcat came by and took another one, you know, something like that, something a little bit less extreme. But basically, here's what you should do after you're done like realizing, yeah, my chicken's gone, you realize that and you establish that fact. Here's what you should really do. Analyze how that happened. Did the chicken escape the yard? Was there something coming in from above? And find out ways you can help improve the situation, because that's already one of the greatest steps you could possibly take in this situation. Now in that video I did some real talk, which I really want to keep this video nice and short and simple, so we're not going to go over that. But if you want to see that, or anything really related to this, click the video on the screen. That's literally the 1-hour video, I'm not joking. If you have time, go ahead and watch it. If you don't, watch parts of it. Take some notes, you know, it's a little bit more informative than this is. This is just a simplified version. But as I said, go down below, click that like and subscribe button. We're trying to reach 4K everything soon, so see you then.